It's our pleasure in the project to hold our first joint webinar with RES4Africa Foundation on the role of renewable energy certificates in pursuing energy sector decarbonization in Egypt. RES4Africa, as you have seen in the film, as it will be presented in details by its General Secretary, Mr. Roberto Vigotti, is a private sector members-driven organization of the largest international companies and institutions in the field of energy transition. The project support to the technical and financial sustainability of renewable energy and energy efficiency sectors is an EU-supported project in cooperation with both Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energy and Ministry of Petroleum and Mineral Resources in Egypt. The project is executed by a consortium of consultants led by DAI Human Dynamics, including, in addition to Human Dynamics, Tractable NG and Lamire International. The project consists of 5 components for reorganization of the core functions of the new and renewable energy authority in Egypt, NAREA, modernization of the renewable energy framework, establishment of an energy modeling unit for the update of the energy strategy of Egypt, establishment of the Cairo Sustainable Energy Information Center, and last but not least, for sure, technical assistance to the energy efficiency and climate unit at the Ministry of Petroleum and Mineral Resources. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ahmed El-Beltagi, the Energy and Transport Sector Manager at the EU delegation in Egypt, to provide his opening speech. Dr. Beltagi.
Thank you, Dr. Hafiz. I will thank you for this kind introduction. I will be very short in order to allow for the kickoff of this very interesting seminar. So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome. I would like just to thank you all for participating in today's webinar. In the EU, we are standing really on the edge of a huge transition for the energy system, and we know that in the future the system will look very different from today. In Europe, for instance, by 2030, we already begin to see a visible change in the mix of transport fuels. By 2030, electric vehicles will be better developed and deployed for use in transport. Overall, by 2050, we could be consuming over half of the energy in the form of electricity. And as we approach the middle of the century, gases and liquid fuels that make up the other half will be increasingly decarbonized. So the good news is that the EU analysis showed that this is really doable. We have 30 years, a generation to prepare, not just to prepare, but to make the most of this evolution, not just for industries to survive, but to thrive. We are in our cooperation, I mean, this is a short background, but in our cooperation with Egypt, we are in the middle of our programming phase from 2022, 7 years ahead. And we are very pleased to have this kind of webinars, which for us are a kind of policy dialogue with all the stakeholders interested in the sector, Egyptians and non-Egyptians. And this will help us better define our future cooperation with Egypt, which we hope that will include interesting and very pertinent subject. Indeed, the green certificates is a very interesting issue to discuss today against the background of what is ongoing in Europe and so on. And we hope really that we will be able at the end of our programming phase to be able to better help and provide our support to Egypt, either in the form of investments or in the form of large technical assistance as the one that we are funding today, in order to better shape the future of the energy sector in Egypt. So thank you very much, and I wish you all a very interesting webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Beltagi, for this very enlightening speech. Ladies and gentlemen, both the Electricity and Gas Regulatory Agency are key players in the renewable energy certification. It's my pleasure to request Dr. Mohammed Musa Omran, Executive Chairman of the Egyptian Electric Utility and Consumer Protection Regulatory Agency in Egypt to deliver his welcome speech. Dr. Musa.
Thank you, Dr. Good morning, everyone, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to begin by thanking the organizers for inviting Egyptera to take part in this dialogue about the role of renewable energy certificates in pursuing energy sector decarbonization in Egypt. It's indeed a good opportunity to be with this high level of expertise deliberating on this matter. Speaking about renewable energy and green hydrogen, let me start by highlighting the fact that the global energy system is experiencing a significant change driven by blend of innovation, decarbonization of the energy sector. Requires urgent action on a global scale to reduce carbon emissions and mitigate the effect of climate change. Renewable energy and energy efficiency measures can potentially achieve 90% of the required carbon reduction. The energy transition will be enabled by significant reduction in the cost of produced energy from renewable advances in renewable energy technologies, and the cost reduction provides the opportunity to pursue a much less carbon intensive model of development. Ladies and gentlemen, green hydrogen is receiving a lot of attention as it could be a promising source of energy in the near future. It is projected to grow rapidly in the coming years. Green hydrogen may be an effective way to secure the production of renewable energy plants that depends on natural conditions, notably the sun and wind, whose intensity can change, impacting the production of electricity. In practical terms, hydrogen makes it possible to store excess electricity produced at certain time and return it later. A good alternative for stabilizing national electricity grid, particularly in North Africa, where most of the countries are increasingly relying on renewable energy in their electrification strategies. Mediterranean countries and African countries include Egypt have excellent green hydrogen potential. Egypt has a central location between Africa and Europe with endless sunshine and strong winds. And this gives an opportunity to drive cheap energy from both to produce green hydrogen. Egypt also has the market condition to become the global powerhouse of hydrogen to export to Africa and Europe. And we are going to place green hydrogen high on our agenda. We are also intended to strengthening our engagement in multilateral initiatives related to hydrogen. In this regard, Egypt has put a plan to develop economic viable internal market of green hydrogen, parallel to exploit and enhance export opportunities, such that Egypt become a leading regional producer, consumers, and exporter of green hydrogen in all its supply forms. The Egyptian electricity sector has set a clear strategy with the targets for cutting our emissions through increasing the share of renewable energy in the generation mix. The strategy has targeted to achieve 20% renewable energy of the total generation capacity by 2022, and this target will be achieved by the end of this year, 1 year ahead of time. This share will increase to 37% in 2030 and 42% in 2035. We are in the process to update our strategy and vision for quickly scaling up renewable energy and green hydrogen production, driving down the cost and boosting demand in hard to abate sectors. This vision will come with a set of ambitious targets up to 2050 and actions. To achieve this ambitious vision in utilizing the renewable energy resources, a lot of procedures has been taken and the incentives offered to encourage private sector participation. As a result of all these incentives, the latest price we got under the PO scheme are 2 cent dollar per kilowatt hour of solar energy and 3 cent dollar per kilowatt hour for wind energy. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know the EU and many other member states like Spain, Germany, and France has published their own hydrogen strategies. Poland, Italy, and Austria will follow. Germany and France are planning to come together and jointly develop large-scale hydrogen projects across the full value chain. Japan also announced the next Olympic Games to be the Hydrogen Olympics. Portugal and the Netherlands are working together to develop a strategic export-import value chain for the production and the transport of green hydrogen. Learning from such international experience and building our vision on our vision, we see a need for a policy and regulatory framework to further push green hydrogen. At the policy level, let me share with you the measure has been taken by Egypt in this regard. A ministerial committee is working currently on the national level to study hydrogen and the possible alternative for its generation and use. A work group has been composed to set roadmap for the future steps of using hydrogen, including preparing a national strategy for hydrogen production, developing an action plan to implement the strategy, and studying the opportunities for localizing the hydrogen industry in Egypt in light of national potential. In the law 230 in 2014 and 87 to 2015 established the legal basis of the guarantee of origin certificate. Such certificate can ensure that the electricity consumed in this context to produce hydrogen has been produced from renewable energy sources. In terms of implementation, on 14 of January 2021, an agreement of intention was signed with Siemens company to start discussion and studies to implement a pilot project for green hydrogen production in Egypt as a first step toward expanding the possibility of exporting. This partnership comes as part of the Egyptian government strategy to balance the country's electricity mix with renewable energy. This policy of sustainable development has led in recent years to the development of major clean energy projects, such as the Pimpan photovoltaic solar complex in Aswan, with total capacity of 1,465 megawatt connected to Egyptian national grid. Ladies and gentlemen, there are several reasons will push forward the green hydrogen industry. To mention some: significantly lower cost of producing hydrogen from renewable energy sources as a result of technological development in this field. The global urgent need to reduce greenhouse gases emission, as many countries have begun to take measures to decarbonize their economics, carbon neutrality, especially in the production and consumption sectors, which has helped focus on hydrogen technology. Dependence on hydrogen has begun in recent years for major energy intensive applications such as cars, trucks, aviation, and heating applications. Based on this, there is indeed an opportunity to integrate hydrogen and renewable energy through the use of hydrogen in energy storage. With the development of electrolyzers capabilities, it's expected that the cost of hydrogen production will decrease by half in the period between 2040 and 2050, while the cost of renewable energy will continue to decrease with the help in relying on green hydrogen in many applications. Ladies and gentlemen, international cooperation is very important for all players. Building on Egypt's experience in renewable energy project, availability of qualified public and private partners, low cost of renewable energy, potential of economy of scale, availability of legal framework for renewable energy certificate, availability of matured infrastructure and diversified economy, there is a potential to cooperate and to work together. This cooperation can be aligned with the effort of recovery of COVID-19 and cover social economic externalities like job creation, gender equality, income improvement, economic competitiveness, etc. I wish to conclude by expressing our full readiness as a regulator to work with you all, share experience and best practices, and learn from each other. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Musa, for the encouraging speech about the future of energy transition in Egypt. And also, I would like to mention that Dr. Musa was a key player in the Iric, which is an African Renewable Energy Initiative, which is targeting to achieve 10 gigawatt by 2020 and 300 gigawatt of renewable energy capacities by 2030. So Egypt will not just represent the know-how gained during these events. It will not be just restricted to Egypt, but Egypt might act as a bridge for this know-how to other its sister African companies. I would like to welcome many attendees. We have attendees from Africa, from Arab countries, from Mediterranean, and I think this is very encouraging to go with this. It's my pleasure to invite Dr. Engineer Karim Mahmoud, the executive chairman of the Gas Market Regulatory Agency in Egypt, and same time, he is a vice president of the Mediterranean Energy Regulator. So we have also tackling the second dimensions of our work, Africa and Mediterranean. Engineer Karim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Hafiz. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome everyone to this important event. I believe this is a great opportunity to share our thoughts on the role of renewable energy certificates and the energy sector decarbonization. GasReg was established in 2017, aiming to monitor and supervise all the gas activities in Egypt and Egyptian market to ensure third-party access, quality of services, free competition, and investment attraction. GasReg exercises all powers necessary to perform this function, including, without limitation, development of a business plan, work program, and different regulatory tools, techniques, and policies in order to create a new gas market design. The 2035 Integrated Sustainable Energy Strategy in Egypt targets the issue of energy mix with growing share of renewable energy along with gradual opening of the electricity and gas market. As you know, there is a growing demand for safe, clean, and affordable energy, where hydrogen will play a key role in this transformation process in future. I assume that building up hydrogen economy in Egypt require a full value chain approach and the creation of investment agenda supported by the high technologies and affordable costs. Accordingly, there should be an early needs of regulatory intervention and the market tools to avoid the risks, address the challenges, and create the convenient framework for hydrogen investment in Egypt. I believe that the development of hydrogen worldwide is gaining a great momentum now. So, as a part of world, Egypt seeks to adopt different policies to align with international initiatives and active procedure in this regard. Thank you so much. Thank you for attention.
Okay. Thank you very much, Engineer Karim, for your speech. And I believe both Dr. Musa and Engineer Karim focus very much on role of green hydrogen, which could play it in the energy transition. And basically, based on an article written by Jonathan Walter, he was the former director of the World Bank in the MENA region, and he was explaining the reason behind that some of the previous regional energy initiatives, renewable energy initiatives like Mediterranean Solar Plan, Desert Tech, why it didn't work as expected is basically one of the reasons was lacking of certification system. There is other reason stated in his presentation, in his article, but one of the main reasons that lacking of certification system. And it's very nice that to know that all parties now is fully aware about the importance of certification in the emerging market for hydrogen, as well as to support the new emerging market for renewable. Now, it's I think you have already seen the very nice film which shows RES4Africa. I think all of us are quite eager to know more about RES4Africa. It's my pleasure to invite Mr. Roberto Vigotti, the General Secretary of RES4Africa Foundation, our partner in this webinar, to deliver his welcome speech as well as shed light on RES4Africa Foundation. Mr. Roberto, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I will go very quickly because I think the movie per se already did a lot, but just underline a few items. I think, Ilaria, can you show my slides? It will be 5 minutes only, just to underline some of the extra things. First of all, we are the former RES4Med. Some of you know us as RES4Med 10 years ago. And now we have a more ambitious, let's say, target in RES4Africa. But next one, you see, we are becoming growing and growing. Used to be mostly an Italian foundation 10 years ago. Now we have Siemens Gamesa, we have EDP, Portugal, United Electric, Vestas, Nortec. So you see, we have more and more indeed European, and we are the first African member. On the bottom line on the part, you see Nedbank, which is the most powerful South African bank, a CSIR, which is the Center of Research for South Africa. And my message is we are looking for African partner, African member, number one. Next slide. Our mission on the left, we want to create an enabling environment for scaling investment to accelerate the transition, mostly renewable, electricity, and of course, with all the uses, including, of course, storage and including hydrogen. And we have 4 main items: dialogue, analysis, capacity building, and on-field project. Today, we are in the so-called dialogue part. Next one. I just want to highlight there are 6 ongoing major programs in the foundation that I want to highlight for you in case you are interested. Not only the investigation of the openness, attractiveness, readiness of African country regulatory framework in conjunction with UNECA, and Egypt is one of the countries. Then we have a new de-risking investment program for Europe to avoid the fragmentation of European instruments called Renew Africa. Again, a very huge program between Africa and Europe. We have access to energy program dealing with the water, energy, and food nexus approach. We are launching early end of May the Grid for Africa cluster, because we think that without sufficient interest in the grids, we concentrate too much on renewable sources, and we have to make attention. We need a lot of grid attention because of the ownership, because of the monopolistic approach, because the value of unbundling, and so on. Again, we are launching this is early June, and we'll be invited. You'll be invited by Ilaria to join. Then we have a digitalization, of course, which is an instrument that will allow many African countries, Egypt as well, to upgrade the value chain of their energy. And this will be mostly led by Schneider Electric and Enel. And finally, the job and economic impact of clean energy, the flagship application that everybody, including the Commission, asked us to do, because Roberto said, when you go to Africa, you need to prove to the minister that by transitioning from coal from gas to renewable, you don't lose job. You imagine when I go to South Africa, when they have 240,000 people working in the coal. So this publication will be ready probably by September. So those 6 are 6 ongoing projects, and I invite you to take a look at them. Next one, quickly. RES4Med, of course, is the branch that Ilaria coordinates, which cares about from Morocco to Jordan, and we really have a tradition and a track record of incredible action. Next slide. you see here the publication that Ilaria is collecting now for the region. Each of these publications is available on the website. You don't need either to register or no password, just download them, because our goal, the more people know about the innovation we do, the more is that we are happy. So please take a look at them and download freely and use them if you wish so. And finally, next slide, of course, I will show you this is the program that Ilaria put together. You see, it's a very ambitious program, mostly for cost-cutting issue, from assessing investment risk, mobility, the why only 2% in Africa, agrivoltaic, flexibility and storage, etc., etc. And then we have this webinar. Today we are on the right part, webinar on the role of REX, and of course a very robust program in Morocco where we have a long tradition. But for these things, Ilaria, we can support you. Next one. We also have a platform to share our know-how. If you want to join the platform, you will receive dedicated information. Just to say, I'm really happy today we are here to support the project and to show the additional programs where we think from a private sector we can add value. So please, I don't want to take any more time, and thank you so much for your attention and wish you the best.
Thank you, Roberto, very much for this presentation on RES4Africa as well as RES4Med. Actually, I encourage all of you to look at the programs which Roberto presenting, Missing Links, Renewable Africa, Access to Energy Program, GREDS for Africa, where GREDS, as Roberto mentioned, play an important role when we talk about renewable energy, innovation and digitalization, and job and socioeconomic impact of clean energy, because the future should be an inclusive future for all of us. So as renewable energy and energy transition we're able to create jobs, this will be a very positive move toward the future. Now, I think we could start our program, but first I appreciate if I could provide such an opening speech regarding our topic today. Ladies and gentlemen, regarding our today's webinar on the role of renewable energy certificates in pursuing energy sector decarbonization in Egypt, as we know, all kinds of energies are in the form of electrons or molecules, yet they are different in their impact on the environment according to their production source and process. The certificate of renewable energy is an approach to unbundle the renewable attributes of the energy from its physical nature as electron or a molecule. It is a tracking approach for the energy from production to consumption. These certificates enable reliable information to consumers about the origin of the electricity or energy in general they consume. They enable efficient allocation of public support to renewable generation via quota obligation. This will also enable trading the renewable attributes of the energy separate from the physical energy, which can enhance the efficiency of the energy markets. These renewable energy certificates are considered by many countries and economic zones as an efficient tool to accelerate energy transition. Both the private and public sectors have vital roles to play in this transition. Several companies joined an initiative, the RE100, committing themselves to source the electricity they consume in all their 150 countries of operation around the world wholly from renewables. According to an MSc thesis developed through the joint program between Cairo University and Kassel University in Germany in 2020, it shows that out of the 85 terawatt hour produced by these companies, RE100, in 2018, 45% was from unbundled energy attribute certificates, compared with 34% for power purchase agreements, offering from utilities accounts only for 17%, while the least sourcing strategy used was production for self-consumption which was just only 3%. Considering this, both the electricity law in Egypt, Law 87 for 2015, and the law for stimulating investments in renewable energy, Law 203 for 2014, considered the guarantee of origin certificate, which is a type of the renewable energy certificates, as a settlement tool for the fulfillment of the consumer's obligation regarding either satisfaction of the renewable energy quota, which is a law give the cabinet of ministers the power to impose it on the consumption sectors as a tool to expand the renewable energy market, or in case the consumer would like to disclose his source of energy supply for trading or public image purposes. On the other hand, considering the EU as one of the most important trade partners of Egypt, where Egypt exports to the EU has reached $9 billion in 2019, the EU is planning to impose carbon border adjustment mechanism as a part of the EU Green Deal. This is expected to get in force in 2023. This means that Egypt export to the EU can be subjected to an additional tax based on their carbon footprint. This will affect the competitiveness of Egyptian exports to EU unless the Egyptian exporter can prove that the energy they used in their production on products have been sourced from a green energy source. Renewable energy certificate is an important tool to facilitate this. Accordingly, certificate will enable an implicit tool for virtual exports of renewable energy. Furthermore, as a green hydrogen, as we heard from our guest speaker today, green hydrogen is currently emerging as an energy carrier for renewable energy. Guarantee of origin certificate system for green hydrogen is needed. This certificate will ensure that hydrogen has been produced from a renewable energy sources as well as supplies used in the production process of the hydrogen are from green sources. The EU has already developed a system for guarantee of origin certificate for hydrogen known as a certified. Egypt should have a recognized similar system, as Egypt is planning to pursue its target to be one of the main green hydrogen exporters in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are quite lucky to have a gathering of high, respectable, and professional presenters. These presenters, this represents a unique opportunity to have these calibers in one event. We will have presentations by our presenters, which will be followed by Q&A session after the presentations. I encourage all our attendees to seize this opportunity to forward their questions using the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. It's my pleasure to invite Engineer Ahmed Swedi, the President and CEO of Swedi Electric, to deliver his speech. But let me, as a beginning, introduce Engineer Swedi. Engineer Swedi served as a President and Chief Executive Officer of Swedi Electric. In 1986, he took the lead in his family business, controlling the first private cable factory in Egypt, Arab Cables Company, turning into one of the largest worldwide providers of integrated energy solutions, with more than 30 production facilities in 16 countries, utilizing the quantities of more than 1,400 professionals and exporting a wide range of high-quality, safe products to more than 100 countries around the world in Africa, Middle East, Europe, and the Far East. Engineer Swedi has a degree in electrical engineering from Cairo University, and he has more than 35 years of career in the field of electricity and energy industries. He attended several professional courses. He is a member of several professional associations and served in different capacities in many conferences. Engineer Swedi, the floor is yours.
Good morning. This is, unfortunately, Engineer Ahmed is out of Egypt. So excuse me that I will give the speech on behalf of him. My name is Dr. Yahya Shankir. I am the Renewable Energy Director in El Swedi. Thanks, Dr. Hafiz, for this introduction. And thanks also for Dr. Muhammad Musa Omran and all the other attendees. Your introduction was perfect, Dr. Hafiz. So let me go through my word, which I need to convey in this morning. El Swedi, in fact, beside what Dr. Hafiz said, we were one of the very few companies or corporates that we have started the renewable energy here in Egypt since the beginning. When people start to talk about renewable energy, this was 2007. We have done lots of progress at that time, among them our factory of the steel tubular tower for wind turbines. I'm not going through this kind of details. However, we were working together with Dr. Hafiz, Dr. Musa Omran, and Dr. Sobki and all others to promote what we have achieved at last, which was the feed-in tariff. The feed-in tariff, I can consider as the first program in Egypt that have supported the renewable energy and attracted investors. And now we have the biggest solar park in the world. And we, as a Swedi, we have and we are participating in this program with 2 projects. In fact, the feed-in tariff program was one of the dreams at a certain time when it became a reality. What we are aiming for is to increase this in Egypt. So, by the way, through this feed-in tariff program, we could manage also to go to the worldwide, meaning currently we have our renewable energy portfolio in Greece and in other countries in operation and working. So, exactly like what happened in the feed-in tariff, now we are start working on the green hydrogen. However, all of the efforts being done now, either from us or from others, are based on, if I can say, private initiatives. These are not regulated. And as have been discussed through all the presentation this morning, the green hydrogen certificate is one of the most important. This is why, because we have the renewable resources, either the natural resources themselves or even the solar PV generating resources that currently exist in Egypt. Whatever we will produce out of green hydrogen will not be consumed inside Egypt. And ourselves, beside others who are doing some sort of private initiatives to start working in this green hydrogen, are aiming for export. So I can see Egypt is a hub for this. But to be a hub for this and to make this kind of business to success, the certification is the most important. So I am urging the regulator and all the other concerned parties to work hard for this kind of certification. If we have this kind of certification, and if we have the opportunity to start our projects, shortly Egypt can become really a hub for exporting green hydrogen to all over the world. We have the resources, we have the experience, we have the investment. Here I am speaking on behalf of El Swedi Electric as one of the biggest corporates here in Egypt. We are ready to invest hundreds of millions in this kind of industry. However, exactly like what happened in the feed-in tariff, that we have the regulation, we have the infrastructure, meaning, the
We have some.
Now,
yes, please.
Now it is the time to work very hard to get this kind of certification to run and to catch with the train to start to be a business hub and investment hub for hydrogen. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yahya, for your speech. For sure, the perspectives of the local and it's not local, I believe it's Sweden. It's an international company based in Egypt, and their insights regarding certification system are very much important to us because it's a leading company, and I encourage all of you, if you have a question specifically regarding carbon border adjustment mechanism and what could be Sweden's strategy to deal with this, as we have seen that part of the export market of Sweden is Europe. So I reserve this question to the end, and I will now switch to Dr. Ala Aez. Dr. Ala Aez is one of the key persons in Egypt. And I was basically lucky to know Dr. Aez since some time and see his activeness in this arena. Dr. Aez has worked in the sustainable development fields for over 30 years, during which he designed and implemented a host of projects and established companies in Africa, the Mediterranean, the Arab regions. These regional projects encompass industry, transport, logistics, tourism, sustainable development, investment promotion, technology transfer, trade promotion, renewable energy infrastructure, gender, human resource development, access to finance, and media. For the past 25 years, he is the Secretary General of the Federation of Egyptian Chambers of Commerce, the Union of African Chambers, and the Confederation of Egyptian European Business Association. Dr. Aez is filling a position in several joint business associations and councils between Egypt and many other countries, and regional, including the Mediterranean Forum also. Dr. Aez, the floor is yours. Dr. Aez, are you still online? Is he online? I think maybe your microphone is muted.
Here is Sheikh Goods.
We have a problem with the voice, Dr. Aez.
Yes, I think I'm disconnected. I'm sorry for that. It's a pleasure here with. It's not.
No, we cannot hear you, Dr. Ala.
Could you switch to another internet connection? It seems that the connection you are using is a little bit slow. We could switch, yes. Okay, if we have a problem with the connection of Dr. Aez, I reserve his presentation maybe come after we could have a better internet connection so he could deliver his speech, because Dr. Aez sure will provide a deep insights about the business community in Egypt and how they look to the energy certification system, both for renewable and hydrogen, specifically, as I mentioned, for both internal market and export, specifically with Europe. I will switch now to power purchase agreement and EU legislation. I invite Dr. Aziz to come back. Okay. I think we could go back to Dr. Aziz. Please, Dr. Aziz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salmawi. Dear friends, I'm sorry for this. I'm Sharm el-Sheikh in a conference and the network
very
here
nice.
is not
I hope you are enjoying the weather there.
The weather is nice, but anyway, first, I'm here wearing maybe a couple of relevant hats. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Salmawi. It's nice being here with lots of friends. I'm here representing the Federation of Egyptian Chambers, as well as the Union of African Chambers, which I'm the Secretary General, and also as the President of the Confederation of Euro-Mediterranean Business Associations. And with all these hats, we're working very heavily on everything that has been put on the table by all of you. Maybe we have to look from the macro. Yes, the EU is a leader with Japan in certification in that sector. However, now with the US, with its new regime, we're expecting to have the whole world working on all types of issues that we are fighting for. We, as Federation of Egyptian Chambers, we have 42 board members who are members of the parliament. And here we will rely heavily on your project to provide to us the tools that we will be presenting to the parliament to get out the required legislations when it comes to the hydrogen side. When it comes to the renewable energy certificates, we believe that it is a tool for promoting exports rather than being a trade barrier. Egypt has enacted its law back in 2014, and yes, we know that the executive regulations were issued. However, the procedures for implementing it have not been properly put in place. We believe that by the end of this year, early next year, we'll have in place these procedures, and it will help us to take a bigger share in our exports. On the other hand, we have the honor as Federation of Chambers to be on the board of all the regulatory bodies of Egypt. We're with our dear friend, Mr. Omran, on his regulatory body for electricity. We're on all other regulatory bodies where we're fighting to promote and enhance the use of renewable energy certificates throughout Egypt. We will put on the table available for the project our 27 chambers all over the country, where we'll be doing seminars promoting to exporters how to utilize it. We will be doing advocacy at all levels, parliament, government, as well as ministries. And last but not least, we'll be working on creating the enabling environment for the private sector. And we believe all of this, same like when the feed-in tariff law was enacted, we have been banned and others coming up. We believe that if we really work hard on putting the procedures in place for the renewable energy certificates and coming up with green hydrogen certificates, we will enhance and promote having renewable energies throughout the country. Last but not least, we have a huge number of projects with the European Union. Some of them are general, where we can support various initiatives. A couple of them are in the field of renewable energy, where we believe in capitalization and blending with ongoing initiatives. And we will be working very heavily as Union of African Chambers with our partner chamber throughout Africa, and Union as Mediterranean Chambers with our partners in the EU and in the North Africa, to promote and ensure that what we're talking about today is realized, walking the talk and getting the thing done. Thank you all, and sorry for the bad connection.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aziz, for your speech. And I believe there's a very strong message from the business community in Egypt that they look to the certificate as a key tool for expanding Egypt exports. It's very more important to know that certificates will not help to give an Egyptian exports an edge, as if the Egyptian exporter succeeded to purchase these certificates and show to their customers that they are using renewable energy, but also it's a tool for virtual export of renewable energy. You don't need a cable, you don't need a pipe to export renewable energy or green hydrogen. You need just to use it in Egypt, and the produced product will be exported, including implicitly both hydrogen and renewable energy. So it's one of a very strong tool to promote both Egyptian industries as an export as well as renewable energy sector. Now let me switch to our next presenter, Mr. Adam White. Mr. Adam White will talk about the power purchase agreements and EU legislation. Mr. Adam White is a director of RES4Africa International, a non-profit foundation representing renewable electricity market players using guarantees of origin. At REC International, Adam leads on policy research and communication, advocacy for the development and implementation of relevant national and European legislations, and support for members and other stakeholders engaging in renewable energy markets. Before joining RECS, Mr. Adam worked for WWF. I think he will explain to us what WWF is, European Policy Office, as a senior research coordinator on the climate and energy. And before coming to Brussels, Adam worked as researchers for the elected members of the UK Parliament and London Assembly. I remember we invited some people from the research department at the Commons House in UK back in 2017 through the Strategic Center at Al-Ahram newspaper when there was a discussion in the parliament regarding the new gas law. So basically, we resorted to this experience before. Mr. Adam White, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Hafez, for that kind introduction. I'm going to try to share my screen so that you can see the presentation. Please let me know if that works for you.
It works now. Start works, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, please put it on the ESM presentation floor. Yes.
Exactly. So do you see it as a presentation now?
Yes, we see the presentation, but Yani, please put it on the presentation status.
Is that better?
Yani, we can go ahead with it, Yani, because we have, it's too small. Yes. We will share it from our side.
Okay, perfect. That's better.
Yes, yes, because Yani, we see it, but it's too small as not read. Yes. Marion? Yes. Please put it on presentation. Yes. Now.
Okay.
I think you see it now. Okay. Please go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much. So if you change to the next slide, you'll see the agenda that I want to present. This may be a little basic for some of the participants. I can see there's a lot of knowledge about EAC systems already, but hopefully this will put us on the same page with a brief introduction to RES International, a description of the EAC systems that are already in place around the world, a bit of a discussion of how we use EAC systems and why we use them. I'll cover a bit of how renewable energy is bought and sold, touching on power purchase agreements. And I'll also discuss the EAC system in Europe in a bit more detail. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see that RES International, we work to provide the knowledge, motivation, and the confidence needed to buy 100% renewable energy. So as Dr. Hafez mentioned, we represent the users of guarantees of origin across the whole value chain. And we do this by working as a knowledge hub, focusing on, for example, regulatory affairs and supporting the development of EAC systems. We also work on.
I appreciate if the presenter muted their microphone so we don't have any interferences. Dr. Rice?
Perfect. Thank you. We also work on all of the issues on the right-hand side of this slide. And most importantly for this webinar, we work on the internationalization and promoting the connectivity and comparability between EAC tracking systems, such as the European Guarantee of Origin and the Iric scheme that Jared will talk about later. And also we work on sector coupling to help drive the development and interconnection of EACs across all energy sources, of course, in the context of electricity and hydrogen, for example. So if we go to the next slide, here we see an overview of all of the EAC systems around the world. So you see that in Europe, there is a guarantees of origin market. In North America, we call that the REC market, the Renewable Energy Certificate market. And then in many other countries, we see the Iric market. And we'll go into each of these in a little more detail in the next slide, so we can change. So here you see the North American market, which is largely considered to be a common market, but there are different issuing bodies. That's the colors you see in the different US states and parts of Canada. So different issuing bodies control the issuance of certificates and the registries of certificates in different areas. It's important to know, however, in the US, that some states have compliance markets, which set a standard that suppliers have to meet to supply a certain proportion of their energy from renewable sources. And in other states, there are voluntary markets. And we can talk a bit more about this difference between compliance and voluntary in more detail if there are questions on this topic. We can go to the next slide. So here you see the European single market, and that's all the EU member states plus Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. They're governed by the EU Renewable Energy Directive that I'll touch on a bit more, and Marco will go into more detail in his presentation. The European market, it's also important to know, is covered by the European Energy Certificate System rules, which cover all of the single market countries now except for Poland, and they also cover Switzerland. The whole of the GO market in Europe is voluntary, so there's no obligation to buy or sell renewable energy in Europe at the moment. And we'll also, as I say, get into more details on this, but you can see that each European country has at least one issuing body, and there are some differences between how the different European countries implement the EU law on guarantees of origin. And so it's not a completely unified system, but we are making steps towards greater harmonization across the European single market on guarantees of origin. So on the next slide, we then see the Iric countries. Again, the different colors represent different issuing bodies. I think it's important to note how much the Iric system has grown in recent years. So it was first set up in around 2014, and now it covers some of the major economies outside of North America and Europe, including all of the BRICS countries of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as well, of course, as Egypt, as you can see here. And I'll leave more details on Iric to Jared in his presentation. So in the next slide, we can talk a bit about the how and the why of EAC systems. If you can change the slide. Thank you. So as you can see here, this is an untracked electricity system where power is generated on the left, injected into the grid or into batteries, and then consumed as a commodity with all power treated exactly the same. So in this system, an end user can't claim to use any specific type of electricity because there's no tracking of the energy from a generator to a consumer. And in the next slide, we can see that it's possible to set up. Oh, sorry, if we go back a slide. So, and one more. There we go. Thank you. We can see a partially tracked electricity system. So this is where some types of generation, typically renewable energy, are certified using an EAC, an energy attribute certificate. And then these certificates are tracked and traded through a market that's separate from the energy market before being cancelled by or for an end user who can then claim the use of that specific unit of energy. So this is broadly the system that exists in Europe at the moment, partially tracked systems with some European countries moving to what's called full disclosure, which we can see in the next slide, where all sources of energy are tracked, whether they are renewable or non-renewable. And this allows all consumers to know where all of their energy comes from. And this is what we're striving to achieve, because we feel it sets both a level playing field and provides all the information that consumers need to buy energy as a product that they specifically choose, and not as a commodity. And that's very important, obviously, for electricity users, but also when you're talking about interconnection and sector coupling for hydrogen users, to be able to identify clearly where the hydrogen they're consuming has come from, what energy it used to be generated. So in the next slide, having looked a bit at the how of energy attribute tracking, we can now look at more of the why. And here you can see that when energy is injected into a grid or a pipeline, whether it comes from renewables or fossil fuels, it cannot be tracked from a producer to a consumer. And so it becomes known as grey energy once it's in the grid or pipeline. And that's why we need certificate systems, as I described before, that allow consumers to know about and choose the type of energy they want to consume. And this turns energy from, as I said, a generic commodity to a specific product based on, for example, the type of energy, where it was produced, how old the generation installation is, and many, many other variables that can be defined by the consumer so that they're buying exactly the energy product that they want. And so these EAC schemes are primarily about information being given to consumers about what they're buying, but they also can provide additional income to renewable energy producers. And if that income is great enough, it can reduce the cost of public support schemes. And as we've discussed, as other speakers have mentioned, this can help to accelerate the energy transition by really marrying up contributions from the market and the public support schemes. So in the next slide, if we change, you can see how certificate markets run in parallel to the energy market. So you can see here how the issuer identifies the attributes of the source of the energy, issues certificates to the generator, which are then traded through registries and platforms before being redeemed by end users, who then make a claim based on the certificate that they cancel or that is cancelled on their behalf. And then both of these markets are governed by legislation and regulations, as well as consumer claims standards. And certificate markets are also specifically governed by EAC system standards that I'll discuss in a bit more detail later on. In the next slide, you can see we'll start to discuss a bit about how renewable energy is bought and sold. So as previous speakers said, we can have bundled certificates or unbundled certificates. And these are just some of the many ways, the number of different ways of buying and selling renewable energy. And they're based on how the certificates are traded relative to the underlying energy. So if the energy and certificates are traded separately, these deals are known as unbundled trades, and separate payments are made for each of the energy and the certificates. And typically the energy would be bought from a supplier and the certificates from a broker, although other options are possible. And we can go to the next slide. And so if the energy and certificates are traded together, then the deals are known as bundled trades, and a single payment is made for the energy and the certificate, typically through a common intermediary. And then in the next slide, then this is where we start to get into more complex forms of buying renewable energy through a power purchase agreement. And this is a specific type of bundled trade. The main distinguishing feature is the length of time that the deal runs for. So they often run for 10 or more years, although some shorter forms of PPAs are starting to be developed. But they tend to be very complex because they really deal with a management of risk on each side, both on the generator side and on the consumer side, and they are used to often to hedge energy prices, so to manage the risk of energy price fluctuation over a long period of time, and therefore they require a lot of legal support in order to execute. So they are typically undertaken by larger corporate consumers, although there is some effort to make them more accessible to smaller consumers as well, sometimes through aggregation of demand. So as I said, if we want to talk in a bit more detail about PPAs in the Q&A, we can. I'd also recommend anyone to look at the resource platform website run by a number of renewable energy production organizations in Europe. They have a lot of information on power purchase agreements, and we work closely with them to ensure that the certificate side of those agreements is well understood by all consumers. So in the next slide, we can see that even with these kind of overarching approaches to the use and implementation of EAC schemes, there are still a number of questions and choices that an individual organization buying renewable energy still has to make. And so RES International has provided an introduction to these choices in the paper you can see here on maximizing the reliability and impact of buying renewables. And some examples of those, of the guidance we provide on buying EACs connected to energy generated in this is, for example, buying EACs from the same market as you are consuming from, wherever possible, and, for example, seeing the greater reliability of using internationally recognized EAC schemes, such as the European Geo Scheme or the International REC scheme, to certify the energy in a market. And this paper is freely available on the recs.org website, and I encourage you to read that. It gives a kind of similarly as I've done here, an introduction to EAC schemes, and as I said, goes into some of these important choices in more detail. So in the next slide, I'll introduce a bit the EU legal framework for guarantees of origin. But as I said, Marco will go into a bit more detail in his presentation. But as I mentioned earlier, the European guarantee of origin market and systems are governed at a number of different levels. The first level is the European level, where the first Renewable Energy Directive in 2001 introduced guarantees of origin and set some basic rules. And then the 2009 Renewable Energy Directive formalized this system, but left quite a bit of space for member states to implement schemes as they saw fit. And now Europe is transitioning from this 2009 framework to the latest Renewable Energy Directive, known as the RED2, that came into force at the end of 2018, and which has an implementation period for single market countries up to the middle of this year. And the RED2 sets a more stringent European legal basis for geo schemes that should lead to greater harmonization across the national systems and markets in Europe that, as I mentioned before, do still have some important differences. And the next slide, you'll see that another important part of that harmonization and standardization in the European single market is the European Standard on Guarantees of Origin set by the CEN organization that's currently being developed, and the European Energy Certificate System rules established and maintained by the Association of Issuing Bodies. So European geo markets and systems continue to develop because of the work on the standard and on the Eac rules, but there is still a lot of work to be done, and that is particularly the case, for example, regarding rules for tracking energy from non-electricity energy carriers, such as hydrogen, because the RED2 now requires all these renewable energy carriers to be certified for the first time, and establishing rules that cover all renewable energy is quite challenging and is taking a lot of work through the development of the CEN European standard. And the conclusion of the negotiations on the standard could have important and lasting effects, because the RED II requires single market countries to comply with this standard. So if it were and should be implemented fully in all countries, it would make the European market much more harmonized and much more standardized, which makes it much more easy to interact with, particularly for multinational organizations either generating or consuming energy. And as I said, I think Marco will get into this in more detail, and I'd also be happy to answer any further questions on this if they come up in the Q&A session. The third way in which, if we go to the next slide, European participants and market participants and stakeholders are working to bring that standardization and harmonization that I've discussed to the market is through the development of standard contracts. And there are three key standard contracts that I'll go through now. The first is a template PPA contract developed by the Resource Platform and the European Federation of Energy Traders that has, I think, been very useful, particularly to smaller organizations wanting to establish PPAs and needing a template to do that. The second is EFET's Eac Geo Master Agreement, which is an agreement under which a number of geo trades can be made by the contracting parties. And the third is REX International's own standard contract for standalone Eac geo trades that can be delivered in single or multiple batches. And all of these contracts are well used in the market and help to make the market more reliable and efficient and provide a good template for doing business on guarantees of origin. Then on my penultimate slide, on the next slide, I wanted to touch on this important part of the Renewable Energy Directive because the greater trend towards harmonization and standardization of geosystems and markets can pose a specific problem for non-single market countries known as third countries. That's because the RED II unifies the European approach and states that member states shall not recognize guarantees of origins issued by a third country except where the Union has concluded an agreement with that third country on mutual recognition. That's the part of the law that's highlighted here. And as I said, Marco will go into this in a bit more detail, but I do want to highlight the cases of Switzerland and the UK, both of whom would seem to meet the criteria stated here of having a compatible geosystem and direct import or export of energy, but neither of whom will be able to export EECs to the EU as of this summer, despite having done so for a number of years already. And this is because the European Commission has informally said that Switzerland cannot conclude an agreement on mutual recognition until an interinstitutional framework agreement that puts the sectoral deals between the EU and Switzerland on under a single framework. Until that's signed, they won't be able to discuss anything on geos specifically. And also, having left the single market through Brexit, the UK government is now seeking mutual recognition on geos, or REGOs as they're called in the UK, but it's assumed that the Brexit deal will have to be significantly strengthened before geos can be specifically dealt with. So it is an open question as to the basis on which Egypt could try to secure mutual recognition with the EU, and I look forward to discussing this with you all in more detail. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to the Q&A session afterwards. Sorry, Dr. Hafez, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm now on. Thank you very much, Mr. Adam, for your presentation. Actually, you raised very important points, specifically Article 19 in the EU Directive, which is about mutual recognition. Actually, we are in the project, part of our scope is to find out what's the requirements for mutual recognition And it's very much important. I think Dr. Raez, through his post in several Egyptian EU forums, could provide support in this. Also, I think we need also to invite both Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well as Ministry of International Cooperation into our discussion, because this is very much important to be considered. Also, I was quite happy when you show that some of the Asian countries, and you market Egypt with green. Actually, I should give the credit to Marco for providing support to Egypt back 10 years ago to understand what's guarantee of origin, renewable energy certification in general, and guarantee of origin specifically, such that it's become part of the both electricity law and law for incentivizing renewable energy. Egypt ERA is an issuing body so far for the guarantee of origin certificates. Yet, this market, as Dr. Yahya mentioned in his speech, that it's not activated yet because the study was back in 2010, 2011. At the time, Egypt ERA designed a system for what we call it a kind of volunteer purchase of guarantee of origin certificate, focusing specifically on the tourist sector for green tourism. But unfortunately, the market was not ready during that time for this. So it looks to be at least being part of the legal framework, yet as things develop and the market start to create its demand, this could be activated. And this is why this project also inviting a consultant to upgrade the legal framework for the renewable energy in Egypt in order to have maybe in this updating law 203, in order to have maybe a specific chapter on guarantee of origin certificate and renewable energy certificate in general. This make maybe a kind of introductory to Marco Letovara. Actually, Marco, as I mentioned, he provided support to Egypt 10 years ago, Egypt ERA, through introducing the guarantee of origin, which is based on his work, which is extended over 2010-2011. We have this article in the law. Marco Letovara is a founder of Grexel Energy Certification, pioneer with 25 years of experience in soft company executive management and 20 years experience in energy certification, electricity disclosure, and relevant enabling regulative frameworks. Marco has played a key role in numerous projects aiming at harmonization of the European energy certificate market, including REDISS, FAST Go. I think Marco will explain this to us, and Certify project. Actually, Certify is a guarantee of origin for hydrogen. Advisor to numerous governments in implementing energy certification schemes, including Bosnia, Herzegovina, Croatia, Finland, Iceland, Serbia, and Egypt. Marco, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hafez, for your kind words. It's nice to be back here. So, I have shared my presentation. I hope you can see it.
Yes, we can see it. Yes.
Is it visible now? Okay, very good. So, and thanks, Adam, also for introducing a lot of the basics and the European regulatory framework around the guarantee of origin. So I will, as I think we are a bit late from the timetable, I can skip those parts and concentrate some others that I think are relevant for Egypt when going forward. So when we are talking about recent developments in the renewable energy certificates in Europe, we are basically talking about the RED2, as Adam mentioned, and then the SENS standard, European Energy Certification System, and indeed Certify when discussing about the hydrogen. So the next slide is my introduction. I will not use time for that because Dr. Hafez did that very good. I could not make it any better. Maybe just to mention that the company Grexel that I'm running is part of the EEX group. EEX is a global commodity exchange group, and then EEX is again part of the Deutsche Börse group, which is a global financial exchange group. So maybe that in addition there. But let's go forward. So instead of just scrolling and going through the regulation, different pieces of regulation, I thought that maybe it's a good idea to have a couple of like a limited number of points that I think that are relevant for Egypt, and I have selected 4 points that are changing now because of the new directive and other related framework there. So first of all, there will be, as mentioned already, there will be a strong guarantee of origin for all energy carriers. Secondly, there is the amount of mandatory harmonization increase. So before that, it has been like a very little that has been written in the directive, and the rest of that has been voluntary. Now that changes totally. And again, as mentioned, again by Adam, the relationship with third countries, and Egypt in this context is considered a third country, that will be centrally coordinated, and the system is changing there. And again, as guarantee of origin is becoming a stronger tool, there is more interfaces to other regulation that needs to be considered when implementing a guarantee of origin system. But let's go forward there. So there is strong guarantee of origin for all energy carriers. So it used to be in the context of the RED I directive, it used to be only electricity. Heating and cooling was mentioned there, but it was not mandatory for member states to implement. Now we have all member states have to implement a guarantee of origin for electricity, heating and cooling, gas, and including hydrogen. I have listed hydrogen here as a separate because that is a slightly different animal from biomethane. And all these have to be, the guarantee of origin for all these energy carriers must be implemented so that the implementation complies with the upcoming SEN standard. And we'll talk a bit more about that after a few slides. Now, as we know, guarantee of origin only provides the supply. So it means that there will be a supply for energy attributes in the market if there will be guarantees of origin. Now the demand comes because the purpose of guarantee of origin is to provide information to consumers. So the demand comes where energy companies will start telling their clients what is the origin of the energy that they have been selling, or companies telling what is the origin of the energy they've been consuming. Now there's only for electricity, there is a disclosure defined in the directive, that's another directive, which means that the power companies have to tell all their clients what is the origin of the energy. This is not existing for the other energy carriers, but what the RED II already states that if they are disclosing the origin of the energy to the consumers, well, in case that is renewable. So basically, when they are selling green energy, they have to use guarantee of origin for proving the origin of the energy. So in that sense, there is already the demand stated there. There shall be no double counting, and this is stronger than before, and it shall be considered also so that it includes other purposes than what the guarantee of origin is for, so that in the consumers. So there are other like regulation in the same directive relating, for example, to transport sector, renewable fuels share, and as there shall be no double counting, there shall be no double counting also like a cross purpose, like between the guarantee of origin and the transport fuel sector targets. Also, there shall be no double support now in the new framework. So when a guarantee of origin is issued, and if there is a government support, if the device is receiving government support, the market price of the guarantee of origin has to be somehow counted taken into account in the level of support. So that can be, for example, done so that it's no certificate, no guarantee of origin is issued for supported production, or if the guarantee of origin goes to government, that then they are auctioned to the market by the government, or that they're good if the support system is based on the tradable certificate, then that takes care of that. Implicitly, residual mix is mentioned, so like it brings a little bit more pieces in the puzzle, because so the residual mix is the composition of the not tracked energy, and the directive text could be read in such a way that there's a residual mix at least for electricity, but possibly also for the other energy carriers. The residual mix has to be put together by the regulation, not really known yet. And because we have several energy carriers, there is energy conversion, and that has to be taken into account somehow. Because now if we have an electrolyzer and so we are producing hydrogen out of electricity, there's conversion from one energy carrier to another. And because there is guarantee of origin that has to be used to prove the origin of the power, then we are issuing guarantee of origin also for the resulting hydrogen. So we are kind of converting the renewable energy guarantee of origin to hydrogen guarantee of origin, and there are some complications and some new regulation needed for that as well. Okay, let's go forward. And then I'm happy to discuss these in the Q&A section. The second point, mandatory harmonization increases. So this is how it looked like in the light of the first RED1 directive. There was very little mandatory harmonization because basically 1.5 pages of text or something like that in the RED2 Article 15. And the rest of the harmonization was taken care basically by European Energy Certificate system, but that was voluntary. And then countries had a lot of room to implement the guarantee of origin system. So a lot of the stuff was done nationally.
Encourage people to go for our website.
And now after RED2, this picture changes completely. So there is the Article 19, which is a bit fatter than the Article 15, the RED1. And then that text refers already to official sense standard. So there has to be, all the implementation has to be done according to standard. And there is a lot more detailed advice in the upcoming standard on how the guarantee of origin system must be implemented. So it's important to understand that the standard is not yet there. The development is ongoing and discussion is ongoing. And then there is voluntary harmonization, and there is not only EECS system, there's also ERGAR for biomethane, and there is the Certify for hydrogen. And there is a much less room for national implementation than it used to be in the previous regulatory framework. This is very important point to understand. So a third point, as mentioned by Adam also already, is the relationship with third countries. So that is, as mentioned, centrally coordinated. So how can we export? What do we need to implement to be able to export green energy from Egypt to EU, for example, hydrogen? First of all, okay, this is not clear yet because we are still missing some implementing and delegated acts that actually set the detailed rules on how these different articles of the RED2 directive work. But I would say that there must be governmental guarantee of origin system, first of all. Probably it means that in the case of electricity, there has to be disclosure regulation as well implemented. There has to be direct physical export possibility or path existing. There has to be this agreement with the Commission. And now, considering hydrogen, that would probably be used something that is that the buyer wants to count against the targets, for example, transport fuel targets in the EU. That means that there has to be proof of sustainability and also proof of supply. So there is more requirements, and these or part of these shall be further detailed in the upcoming delegated and implementing acts. So the last point here is that there is more interfaces to other regulation and different articles of the RED2. So country of origin is not like a standalone instrument, as much standalone instrument anymore as it used to be given in the old regulatory framework. I'm trying to put this all together by looking at from a practical case point of view. Let's consider that we have a hydrogen, we have an electrolyzer, there's a solar farm, and there's electrolyzer, and we are supplying that. Let's consider now that we are supplying that from Egypt to the EU, and that is used in the EU for transport fuel sector. So what kind of certification systems we have to have in place to be able to say that this consumed hydrogen in the EU was indeed sustainable and renewable? First of all, we have to certify the origin. So that is for sure a country of origin system. There has to be a country of origin registry and the legislation and everything in place in the source country. Secondly, we have to prove the sustainability, and that has to be done according to voluntary schemes, which there's an audit needed, and then there is a proof of sustainability can be given to this production. And the third, we have to certify the delivery of the hydrogen. So there is a system called mass balancing. We don't have the time to dig really deep there, but because the hydrogen here, the renewable hydrogen is blended with the fossil sourced hydrogen along the way, there has to be a system how we prove and say that this hydrogen was only counted once there. Now, if we look at the certification scheme and certification systems, we need a governmental guarantee of origin scheme for the origin. We need to have a voluntary scheme for fuel certification. These exist already. And then we have to have consignment tracking for the mass balancing system to prove the delivery of the hydrogen to the EU. And looking at different actors that are running these schemes, there's a national issuing body for guarantee of origin scheme, and there's a voluntary scheme operator to running a voluntary scheme that is accredited, approved by the European Commission to give the proof of sustainability there. And then there's to be the supply chain has to keep track on the consignments and how much renewable is put in and how much renewable is taken out from consignments. And putting all these together, we have a supply, something called what we call supply certificate, and this finally gives right to say that this is renewable, it is sustainable, it can be counted in the target, and it's not double counted. So all that is needed to do that, and it looks quite complicated. And indeed, certify was mentioned several times already. So in the certify, and just to disclose that we are part of the certify process. So certify aims at putting these together and providing a harmonized system how all this certification can be provided, so that it is it's a complete package and connected and easy for market parties to handle. And I think I used a bit more time than I was given, but this is that's it. So thank you, and I'm happy to discuss in the coming Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Marco, for this presentation. It shows that things start to be more complicated. Maybe not like 10 years ago when we started to talk about guarantee of origin certificates. Marco pointed out we are not just talking about hydrogen as a gas, we are also talking about biomethane, which is also needs, because we receive a lot of questions about who will be or could be the issuing body for hydrogen and biomethane. He raised a question which Mr. Adam also talk about Article 19, which is about mutual recognition. And the question is being raised, what about if we consume electricity from renewable or hydrogen from renewable source in producing products in Egypt, and then we export this project to Europe and claim that it has been produced from renewable energy sources? So a lot of questions being raised. This is maybe make me eager to switch to Mr. Gard Praslavsky. Mr. Gard Praslavsky is a leading expert on the use and implementation and functionality of attribute tracking system such as United States Track, European Guarantee of Origin, GO, and global international REC standards. His expertise is used by organizations such as RE100, which we pointed that 85 terawatt hour now is being traded. This is number back to 2018 based on renewable energy, and many international companies, some of them exist in Egypt, who commit themselves to be part of this initiative, wherein he is a member of the technical working group for RE100. Jard also founded the International REC Standards, a not-for-profit organization for energy attribute tracking systems that enables the simplified implementation of reliable, tradable REC system and national renewable energy markets in adherence with electricity market regulations worldwide. Mr. Jard, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here. So I will give a presentation now. I'm going to put my slides on the screen, and my presentation is going to be shifting gears slightly. The focus of my presentation is fully on Egypt and on development of reliable tracking systems in Egypt for Egyptian consumers, but also for multinational companies with operations in Egypt. So really it's about creating the mechanisms to support reliable and robust renewable procurement in Egypt. You'll see my slides in front of you, and I'll do it in presentation mode. I hope that you can see them in a full size.
Yes.
The best way to describe what Iric standard is to first look at the issuers that are adherent to the Iric standard around the world. The Iric standard, as we heard from Dr. Hafez, is an implementation system for governments and stakeholders to introduce attribute tracking systems in line with all of the criteria that is necessary to make reliable and robust claims. The Iric rules are adherent to RE100, to CDP, to all major international sustainability standards. But it's very, very important that the local implementation of Iric is done by local authorities and local stakeholders in line with local regulations. It's a very critical aspect of the Iric standard. And it's actually modeled off of the European Eac standard, you could say, where there is a voluntary implementation, the Eac standard that we've now heard from Adam and also from Marco. And then there is implementation at the national level. You'll see the issuers of the Iric standard in front of you. Currently, there are issuers adherent in Singapore, for example, which is the grid operator, SP Group. There's the grid operator of Thailand, who is EGAT, who is also the grid operator. You have in Abu Dhabi, the Ministry of Energy in Abu Dhabi is the issuer of IREX in that region. You have, for example, in Dubai Carbon Center of Excellence, who was then appointed by the Ministry of Dubai to be the issuer in this region. And then you also have nonprofit organizations and for-profit entities that are appointed to be the issuer of IREX in those specific countries. Currently, within Egypt, as we've heard previously, the existing system was on hold. It was voluntary, and it wasn't necessarily implemented many years ago. In that regard, we started allowing for the issuance of certificates in Egypt with GCC, the Green Certificate Company, as the issuer. Now, it would be our goal, and you'll hear by the end of my presentation, to have a local issuer in place. Potentially, the Egypt Air, as we heard about previously, would take on this role of issuance of Iric certificates in the future. It's one of these aspects that we try to work with national authorities on, and something that we can take away from this webinar as well. Why did we develop the Iric standard? We did that because we recognize that voluntary markets lead to robust and reliable market development around the world. Voluntary markets involve the whole supply chain, from producers to market players to traders to suppliers to consumers, and it shows governments a reasonable development path. And the problem is, when you don't have any stakeholders involved in a system, and the government tries to develop a system from the ground up, it can often be quite challenging because there aren't enough people on the ground that know enough about the system to provide input. So what we try and do with the development of a voluntary system is get as many stakeholders locally possible, educated, informed, but also making money from the local system so that when the government decides to come in and take additional steps and additional regulation, it can be done in a reasonable and reliable way. It's not about reinventing the wheel. It's about providing standards for the development of attribute tracking systems. We recognize that standards, like we heard, for example, from Adam, there's three fundamental major standards around the world, the US REC system, the European GEO system, and the Iric standard. We see that they have 5 major criteria that they fulfill. 1, they simplify the choice and trust consumers have when choosing renewables. If you're a company like Microsoft or Google or Apple or any of these very large multinational companies, you are trying to purchase renewables in the Netherlands and Germany and England, but also in the United States, but also in Mexico and Thailand and Egypt and Morocco and Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And if you're able to do that in adherence with standards, it simplifies your understanding of the market because you don't need a local lawyer, a local attorney, you understand the rules and regulations. So what this does is it increases the use of these systems. And it increases the foreign investment, the direct foreign investment, because if it's easier to consume renewables, people will do it more readily, and they will also then pay higher value for the renewable generation in that country. It eliminates implementation problems when starting a new system. As you can see in this slide, we've implemented the system in many markets around the world, and it happens now in a structured manner. So it's quite simple to implement those systems. It reduces or even eliminates costs when it comes to developing a REC system. Iric standard systems can be developed at 0 cost because they are paid for by the eventual end users, those Googles and Microsoft large companies, but also the supply chains of those companies that are likely based in Egypt, among other countries as well. And then the last portion is it shows a reasonable development path for stakeholders to join the developments, including NGOs and labeling. So it really makes it very well understood to the whole world. The whole world immediately understands the Egyptian REC is adherent to the Iric standard, and as such, it is well understood and well recognized by stakeholders. The issuance of the Iric standard since our development in 2015 has taken off quite significantly around the world. In 2020, there was more than 30 terawatt hours of issuance, with similar numbers of redemption taking place in the previous year as well. In 2021, you can see this graph only goes to March 8th. It's more than 10 terawatt hours of issuance since March. Now, of course, Egypt is a portion of this issuance. It isn't a very significant portion, but that's one of the reasons that we want to get issuers involved long-term. The Iric standard is separated into 3 fundamental aspects. The first is the standard setting body who writes the rules and regulations. The other is the market facilitators who implement the market. These are the issuers, the registry operators, all the organizations that need to implement a reliable system in a fair manner for all of the market players. The market players in the bottom are the traders, the buyers, the device owners, and the beneficiaries, or what we would call end users. And each of these various sections, each of these various elements is completely segregated from the other to make sure that there is no unfair competition and that everyone is participating on the market fairly and in a trustworthy manner. So again, going back to this slide, you see here, for example, we are talking now specifically about the issuers, and you see on this slide the issuers of the various countries that facilitate the implementation of the Iric standard in their country. So these are very much local REC systems. These are a Thai REC or a Singaporean REC or a Chinese REC, just like it is an Egyptian REC. It's just adherent to the Iric standard. How do we coordinate with authorities? There's many different ways in which we do this. It works sometimes by introducing an issuer. This could happen in Egypt as well. You'll see the letter to the right there from the Ministry of Energy in Abu Dhabi that says, "Dear Iric Standard Foundation, we want this organization to be the issuer of certificates in Egypt, or this organization to be the issuer of certificates in Abu Dhabi." It is the right of the government, a government is sovereign, to choose who should be issuing certificates in their country. And it is, of course, voluntary to adhere to the standard, but it is, of course, beneficial for the broader understanding of the market more generally. We can introduce legislation on the issuance of certificates, whether that's done at the facilitation level or that's done at the level of the standard. We can work with authorities to develop labeling criteria for high quality labels for Egyptian renewables as well, which can be could serve to procure a higher value for those specific types of renewables that are supported by the Egyptian authorities. The last portion is you have market players or national authorities that can create marketplaces, whether these are auctions or different types of bulletin board mechanisms that allow for the sale of renewable electricity in Egypt. This is something we're working on together with the Turkish authorities, for example, together with local stakeholders and other types of entities as well, to make sure that Egyptian certificates, or in this case, where we're working on in Turkey, Turkish certificates are able to be easily understood and recognized by Turkish-speaking consumers. And the same could be done, for example, in Egypt as well. So the Iric standard is not about creating a strict method of implementation. Rather, it's about providing national authorities with a reliable way to introduce attribute tracking systems that fit their needs and their demands. In Egypt, currently, there are 2 devices registered with the Iric standard. That is the wind energy park of Ras Gareb, and that is the Benban Village Solar Park. In 2020, there were more than 650,000 megawatt hours of certificates issued from these 2 devices. And in the future, for 2021, we would, of course, be looking to support the use and development of the standard, but more importantly, the use and development of RECs in Egypt by coordination with local authorities, local ministries, by coordinating with RES4Africa, and of course, coordinating with all of the stakeholders here today as panelists and as attendees. So if you have questions about how to receive IRECs, how to consume IRECs, or trade IRECs currently in the Egyptian framework, please feel free to contact us. And of course, we are also more than happy to discuss as well ways in which we can coordinate with the national authorities to make sure that the implementation is in line with all of the expectations that the national authorities have as well, including who the issuer is, what potential restrictions there are, or other types of mechanisms as well. So that is my short presentation. If you're interested in receiving more information about the Iric standard, please feel free to contact me or request our newsletter, which is sent out every 6 to 8 weeks. And of course, I'm more than happy to take any questions that you have in the Q&A with the time we have remaining. Thank you very much, Dr. Hafez, for your time.
Thank you, Jared, very much for your enlightening presentation. You have highlighted the 3 separate main player legislations or entities responsible for setting the system, issuing bodies, and market. And this is basically defined for us the importance of stakeholders who should be involved with legislators, EOS, Egyptian Organization for Standards, like we have seen that CNECU has already a standards for CEN have already standards for certified, and the issuing body. Actually, now I can switch to the Q&A, but first I would like to point a question received from Dr. Khayyab, chairman of NARIA. Basically, he raised a point of that certificate, our renewable energy certificates, emphasize on sector coupling, as it has been mentioned, or sector integration, specifically different sectors like industry, mobility, agriculture. His question is about, do we believe that certification system need to each sector will be tailored according to the different parameters? How could renewable energy certification be a tool to integrate renewable energy with different sectors such as industry, mobility, and agriculture? I may forward this question to our last speaker, since he spoke about Egypt in specific. So Garrett, do you think that we're going to have a different kind of certificates for different applications, or it will be a unified kind of certificate?
So I think, especially when it comes to the Iric standard, we've been working with a number of different market facilitators to coordinate the creation of a hydrogen REC that would be adherent to the Iric standard as well. And it would be our desire, of course, to work with national authorities to facilitate this more broadly across many jurisdictions, including in Egypt. The difficulty is the reality is a renewable REC will very frequently be the basis of renewable hydrogen. Because how do you know if your hydrogen is renewable or green if you don't know the energy input into it was renewable and green as well? So in the display that Marco had, and I'd like to give the floor to Marco to discuss this more in detail as well, but if you have a closed system, then that's very easy, because there's no interconnections to the grid. Maybe the solar panel is producing hydrogen directly, and then of course you can produce a renewable hydrogen GO. But I think what's going to be more common, and Marco can correct me if I'm wrong, is that hydrogen is going to be created quite frequently with connections to the grid, which means you are going to have renewable GOs, renewable RECs, adherent to the Iric standard, adherent to the Eac standard, that are reliable and robust, and form the basis, the foundation of the green hydrogen system, the green or the renewable hydrogen system. And I'd like to give the floor, as I said, to Marco to maybe discuss this in more detail, because I think he's more of an expert here on this specific aspect. Marco?
Marco?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is really a field where we do not have all the detailed rules yet, and we don't know how it will be in the future. But maybe just to extend one point that Jared mentioned there, that if we have an electrolyzer that is connected to the grid, and then let's say we have a power purchase agreement with the windmill in the same network, we have to there will be more rules on how we can be sure, or what is enough to certify that this power is coming from that wind park. It's for sure it's going to be so that guarantee of origin or Iric certificate alone will probably not be enough, but there will be a requirement for something like temporal matching, so that the consumption by the electrolyzer has to happen in the same short time interval, whether that is an hour or 15 minutes, as the production happened in the power plant. So at least that is one of the things that will be needed there, and there will probably be different ways on how to prove that. Another thing is that if we look at the whole supply chain, and let's consider there is a methane and biomethane included, the certification and the proof of supply audit has to be done all the way to the originating farms and the supply chain, and the sustainability has to be proved there. So as Dr. Hafez mentioned earlier, there's the complexity has grown there, but on the other hand, there will be more clear rules also, that we also know much more now what we must do, except that we have to wait for this couple of missing regulation as well as the sense standard to actually be there.
Okay, thank you, Marco. I appreciate if you allow to extend this session for just 10 minutes to cover many questions we received. Actually, we received questions from Dr. Musa to Marco could you further elaborate of the sustainability of the register? I remember back when we was talking about that we could comply with AIB requirements in order to be mutual recognition, and there was a kind of a soft agreement regarding using Drexel register. Now, what could be, how we could have a kind of a register, and what could be the disclosure of the regulations too?
Yes, so if I understand correctly, so what is the register for the proof of sustainability, which is needed for at least for transport fuel targets and many other purposes as well? So there is no, at this moment, there is no centralized registry. These certification bodies like RED-Cert and ISCC, they have their own registries where they register, and anybody can retrieve all the certificates of their clients. Now, in the Certify project that was mentioned a couple of times, there will be probably that will be one source in the future, and that tries to collect all this information together in the one registry. But that is some work that is in progress now, and it's not there yet. Another question was regarding a disclosure regulation. So disclosure regulation is simply regulation that obliges energy companies, when they are selling energy to consumers, to disclose the origin of the energy, and especially if there is a renewable energy, they have to disclose the amount of renewable energy in their energy mix that they are supplying to consumers. I hope this answers the questions.
We have a question from Dr. Karim. Really, I might forward it to Engineer Adams, which is how frequent is the regulatory bodies being the issuing bodies for certificates around the world? We heard that in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi there is a different arrangement. I believe there is certain requirements, might be access to information as well as not be a market, has a market interest. So is regulators, we have in Egypt here, Egypt era, according to the law, is an issuance. But is it's usually that regulator being the issuing body for this guarantee of origin certificates or renewable energy certificate in general?
So if I understand the question correctly, I think it's about how issuing bodies are regulated, and that.
No, I mean, is the regulator could be an issuing body?
So governments can appoint their own issuing bodies as a public agency. So, for example, in the UK, Ofgem is the energy regulator and the issuing body. And I think that's the case in a number of different European countries. So this is entirely possible, but as Jared said, the most important thing is to ensure independence of the issuing body. And if that can be done within the organization that's also the regulator, there's no reason I see not to do that. And it happens in Europe, for example.
Very good. I have a question regarding specifically hydrogen. Maybe I forward it to Jared, which is, what about if hydrogen is blended in a pipeline of methane? Methane was blended with hydrogen. Is that in case how we could justify that for the recipient, that certain percentage of the gas being received is green hydrogen? Is that there is a mechanism for this, or it's not yet?
No, but in many ways, this is very similar to what we do with electricity as well, if you think about it that way. Electricity as well, we put in renewable sources, of course, but on the grid itself, there's sources from everywhere: renewable, non-renewable, fossil, coal, wind, solar, and we mix them all together on the grid. And it's going to be very similar, of course, with hydrogen as well, and with actually any type of kind of grid-connected source. When it enters the grid, we lose track of it. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's an electron or if it's an element, we lose track of it when it hits that pipeline, when it hits that connection. hydrogen, that grid. And as such, we need these tracking mechanisms in place, as we're talking about today, whether it's for electricity or for hydrogen, to make sure that we know the origin and the endpoint on the specific grid. And we need that for electricity to finish the electricity life cycle, where it is started and where it hits the electrolyzer, and from the electrolyzer to where that hydrogen is eventually consumed, regardless of the transportation network. So the transportation network, I think we need to see as completely separate from how we are going to be verifying this through renewable electricity certificates, renewable energy certificates in the case of hydrogen or green gas, if that makes sense, Doctor.
I have a question, or we received a question to Dr. Musa Omran regarding when Egypt ERA will initiate the renewable energy certificates GO system for Egypt. Is there a preparation, a kind of schedule that Egypt ERA is preparing to go forward with it?
Thank you for the question, Dr. Hafiz. This is Mohammed from Egypt ERA. We're actually currently studying and investigating our possible interventions, and in light of the law, as you mentioned, and in light of Egypt ERA's responsibility. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, but I believe through cooperation between the project, our EU project, as well as Egypt ERA, we try to bring it back and try to accelerate this process. There was a question about energy efficiency. I believe this is a different system which is called white certificates. Could Adams or Marco or Garrett, I don't know, the system for white certificate, is it some of their companies working in that, and is it different from renewable energy certificate? I believe if I forward to Marco.
Yes.
The white certificate.
I can start.
Different renewable energy certificate.
Yeah, I hope you are hearing me well.
Dr.
Hafiz, we are not hearing you.
Okay. Yes. Actually, the question was about the energy efficiency certificates or white certificates. Is that different from renewable energy certificate, or it's the issuing body may be the same issuing bodies, or the process might be a little bit different?
Yes. So the EX Group is actually issuing white certificates in France. There is no European-wide regulation for white certificates, which is basically energy saving certificate. It means that there are quotas for energy savings for power companies and maybe other consumers. They have to save certain amounts of energy, and this amount might raise yearly. And those who are not meeting, those who are exceeding their quotas, they will get certificates, and they can sell the certificates to those who are not meeting the quotas, and that's how the certificates gets the value. So that is like a white certificate, energy saving certificate. No regulation, uniform regulation in Europe, but that might pop up in several countries. Then an energy saving, energy efficiency certificate, then again, we can consider that as being, in Europe, we have a high efficient cogeneration certificate, which is basically issued for electricity that has been produced in the high efficiency cogeneration facility, and where the energy savings have been more than 10%. So then you get a certificate for that production. And some consumers might prefer having electricity where there has savings have taken place in the generation phase.
I think this is raise a very important point for Egypt ERA, because according to the electricity law, there could be a kind of a purchase from energy produced from cogeneration, specifically prices, or energy generated from waste. And I believe availability of certificates like this should be a kind of a settlement mechanism to be assured that the supply is basically a true cogen, which 10% savings, as Marco pointed, or energy generated from the waste. There is a question to Mr. Adam about what he mentioned about bundled and unbundled trading. Is it a little bit you could shed a light about what's the difference between bundled and unbundled trading for both commodity and certificates?
Yeah, certainly. So basically, a bundled purchase of renewable electricity or any form of renewable energy is when you buy both the commodity energy and the product certificate together from a seller. So you buy them bundled into the same contract. And unbundled is when the certificate is separate from the energy. So as I mentioned, a PPA is a typical bundled certificate where you're buying the energy and the certificate together in one package, basically one contractual package. There is some discussion from different market participants as to the relative merit of bundled or unbundled. For us, there's not an inherent difference between whether a contract is bundled energy and certificates or not, as long as the consumer is able to identify the product certificate that they want to buy and gets the information that they need and therefore pays for that, and with the money going to the generator. What can be very valuable is long-term agreements. They can really help to add new capacity to the grid. And this is often where PPAs are held up as being the kind of the gold standard, because a renewable energy developer can envisage a project they want to build out. They go to a large consumer and say, listen, I need to get this financed. Will you sign a PPA with me saying that you'll buy the power and the certificates for 10 years at X price? I'll take that to the bank. I'll get the financing at a good interest rate. Then I'll build the project and supply you with the energy that you bought. And that's kind of a gold standard of using certificates and energy in a bundled contract to add new generation to the grid and really accelerate the energy transition. So that's some of the discussion that goes on around bundled and unbundled certificates.
Yes, thank you. I think our last question might go to Garrett, which is about if an entity is consuming electricity from renewable sources and have a certificate which proves that, is that subject to Article 19 if they're going to export this product to Europe, or it's something different?
Sure. So it would be with the aspect of importing renewables from any country outside of the European Union into the European Union, you are subject to Article 19.
No, this is now implicit because I export product where a renewable energy has been used in this product. Is that product also subject to Article 19?
No. So with the product itself, so imagine, for example, that you are exporting a service or a product that has used renewable electricity in Egypt, adherent to the Egyptian rules for RECs or GOs or whatever mechanism is in place, and that physical product is exported to Europe, it would no longer be adherent to Article 19. The organization making the export would be able to make a claim without being adherent to Article 19 that they have used renewable electricity in the production of that product, for example.
Oh, thank you. Maybe last question, we just received it. If Dr. Yahya is still online, we have a question about what's the plan in Sweden regarding carbon border adjustment mechanism. Specifically, Sweden is what Europe is one of the exporting markets for Sweden Group. Is Dr. Yahya is online? He was online. Oh, is there? I think we could get his answer written and distributed to you, because basically part of the objectives of this seminar is to raise the interest among Egyptian exporters and Egyptian industrial community as well as service trading communities for using renewable energy. At that point, I'll stop. Thank you very, very much for our very distinguished presenters for the thoughts they shared with us. I would like to thank Marion Kozman, thanks Mail Ashmawi for what they did for this webinar to come in live. Also Ilaria from RES4Africa for her work jointly with our project in formulating, coordinating, arranging, contacting our presenters such that it came. I hope it was informative to our participants, which cover almost the whole globe. We have people from the United States, we have people from Europe, from Africa, from Arab countries, even from Asia. So thank you very much, and looking forward for our next webinar, which will tackle the point raised by Dr. Khayyat about sector integration. We will notify you about the timing for this webinar. Thank you all, and looking forward to see you soon. Bye-bye.